Kia ora everyone, I hope all is well with you wherever you are in Aotearoa or the wider world. We have now truly settled into winter here in the southern hemisphere, and so it is cold, rainy, and, as is usual for the city of Wellington, terribly windy. A good time to be doing the 3 R's. Researching, writing, and recording. In saying that, I haven't actually been behind the microphone for a few months now, as I recorded all the Abel Tasman episodes back in March and April. So, if you have recently joined Patreon and are wondering why I haven't said your name yet, that's why I recorded all those episodes in bulk quite some time ago. Don't worry, they will be coming. Speaking of Patreon, we didn't talk about the latter half of Tasman's life in the main feed, but we did cover it in a Patreon bonus episode. So, just as a reminder, if you are interested in what happened to Tasman, Vischer and Gilliesmans, head on over to patreon.com/historyaotearoa and sign up for the $5 a month tier to get access to that episode and a few more about some other expeditions we touched on. I'm trying to make these Patreon exclusive episodes a bit more regular and relevant to what we are talking about in the main feed. So, if you have thought about supporting Hans in the past, but didn't want to for whatever reason, now might be a good time to jump on board if you want a little bit of extra content. While I haven't been recording the past few months, that isn't to say I have been idle. A lot of work is going on in the background to prepare for the next set of episodes, where we will be focusing on another explorer that came to Aotearoa. Unlike Tasman, this explorer had a much different experience on their voyage, being beset by disease, distrust, and a whole lot of death. There's twists, turns, greed, and some tense diplomacy between Europeans and Māori. I think it will be really interesting. I've certainly found it very interesting to research, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing this story with you. However, the main reason for this episode, other than to shamelessly plug Patreon, is just to let you know that these scripts are still under construction. So there will be no new episode this week. I am just about finished doing some last reading of journals from the ship's officers and putting those final touches on the scripts, so I'm hoping that we will be back to our regularly scheduled programming in 2 weeks' time, or 1 week if you are on Patreon, because they also get episodes a week early. I can't promise they will be ready by then, but that is my prediction based on my current pace. So don't panic, they're not too far away. If you are starving for New Zealand history content, I did recently make an appearance on another podcast called 80 Days. This podcast goes around the world, talking about the history and culture of various cities, and their most recent episode, as of recording this, is all about Wellington, and I contributed some of my knowledge about our capital's earliest history. It's a really great episode, if I do say so myself, full of interesting information, so I highly recommend you check it out. If that 2-hour-long episode isn't enough, and you need even more, I also recommend a recent episode released by Pax Britannica. Samuel Hume talks about the 1919 New Zealand general election between William Massey and Sir Joseph Ward. It's a really fascinating story, with the two leaders having formed a government across the benches during World War I, despite the fact that both men hated each other, which leads to a lot of drama in the lead up to the election. I didn't know that this episode was getting released, and I didn't really know anything about this particular election, so I found this episode really, really interesting. So again, I highly recommend it. If you want to give the 80 Days or Pax Britannica episode a listen, I'll put a link in the show notes for each of them. That is it from me. The next time you hear my voice, we'll be jumping forward in time to 1769. Those of you who know your history may be getting a bit excited, but no, we'll not be talking about James Cook just yet. We will be spending a lot of time with him on his 3 voyages. So before we get to that, there is one other explorer I want to talk about. Jean-Francois Marie de Surville. If you don't know who that is, then I don't really blame you. He isn't very well known. And like Tasman, his direct impact on our story is fairly minimal. But his is just such a fascinating tale. He is one of the first Europeans that has any extended interaction with Māori. So while Cook is traditionally said to have much more impact in the broad sweep of history, de Surville is important in other aspects, particularly in laying the groundwork for future French exploration and colonisation of the region. Something that will, in part, result in a document known as Te Tiriti or Waitangi. So we are going to get very well acquainted with de Surville and his crew as they try to find their fortune in the Pacific. See you then.